An exit interview with Madison Police Chief Wray this morning on For the Record. Good morning, I'm Neil Heinen. After 30 years in the Madison Police Department, nearly 10 as chief, Wray is retiring. I think it's safe to say the department has changed in 30 years. The city certainly has. And Wray, especially as chief, has dealt with the best and the most challenging of it all. We'll talk about policing in 2013, the Madison of 2013, and what's next for him as I welcome to For the Record, Chief Wray. Welcome, Chief.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
You were just saying you remembered the first time we did this,
Absolutely.
Which was right after you were named chief in 2004.
Yes.
It's been quite a 10 years. Just remind us again, why now? What prompted this decision now?
You know, I met with Dave Chislevitz, as a matter of fact, just towards his end of his tenure, and he said, well, Dave, if you're reelected, you'll get an opportunity to see a new chief. And when I took the job, I said that every 5 years I would evaluate and see where things are. Because I think it's important that you don't just maintain a job to do the things that you want to do, but you're constantly evaluating where the organization is, where the community is, and where you are. And so, you know, last year about this time, my wife and I were talking about retiring, that I would be retiring sometime in the spring of this year. She had just retired in September, about a year ago, and we were looking at next spring. And we postponed some things because there was an awful lot going on within the organization and within the community. And you know, about a month and a half ago now, we sat down and discussed it. And she just said, look, you know, you've been doing this now close to 30 years, you know, 10 years as chief. I don't think you're ever going to retire because you're always going to think of one more thing that you want to do for the city and for the community. And she was right. So she held me to it and made the decision, and here we are.
All right, so at that time then, and I think this is true, you had done about as much as you could do with the officer-involved shooting incidents.
Correct. That
led to your decision to stay and work with this stuff.
That is correct. We had, the investigation had been complete. Officer was exonerated. We had looked at and heard from a number of community members about what were their concerns in the aftermath of the officer-involved shooting. I had staff working on adjustments, policies, and procedures. For example, let me hit on a couple of those. The community asked the question, Chief, does the Madison Police Department take blood after an officer is involved in the shooting to test it? And we didn't. And that was really important. That was some good feedback. So we're working with the union to see what kind of procedure we could put in place. With our officer-involved shooting team, for example, we did not have a conflict of interest question posed to the investigators. We now have that. We are now looking at ways to increase the number of interviews that are electronically recorded. So those are some of the things that when we receive feedback in the aftermath of the officer-involved shooting, we start looking at making adjustments.
But help us, understand this fundamental philosophical question that keeps coming up, and now in the wake of 3 officer-involved shootings, in terms of alternatives to deadly force in those situations. I mean, that's what's so hard for so many people to get their hands around. Either they envision themselves in that situation, or they think they know what the circumstances were, and they ask the question, how is it that in all 3 of those cases, deadly force was seen as the best option?
Now, you know, it's recent, and in our history recent, and people are thinking about the November officer-involved shooting of 2012, but the Madison Police Department in the last 10, 15 years has averaged 1 officer-involved shooting every 2 years. This is unique, and it's drawn a lot of attention, and I can see why the community is raising those questions and those concerns, but nothing really has changed. What we look at is, we look at it from, you know, the totality of what the people that are involved and the officer that is involved. But what generally community members will say, and we've heard this, and it's not just unique to Madison, is how come they could not shoot the person in the leg? Or how come they could not shoot the person in the arm?
Right.
You know, were there other alternatives? When officers are trained, they are trained to look at what all is going on and take the minimum amount of force or actions necessary to stop the aggression. The goal is not to kill, the goal is to stop the aggression. And so in doing that, I mean, if verbal commands, if de-escalating through words will do it, and that will be enough, they will do that. If, you know, creating distance, creating space, they will do that. If looking at other terms of less lethal, like a lot of people are familiar with the taser or the beanbag, they will do that. But when an officer is in a position where they reasonably believe in the totality of the circumstances support them in this, the evidence, the surrounding information, that they had no alternative, they can use deadly force, and they're authorized to save their life and the life of someone else. And that is really what has transpired for decades. So in the circumstances that we're talking about the last three, but in all of these that I have been present with, when officers have been authorized, because we've never had one that was not cleared by the DA in my tenure, and we've exonerated the vast majority of these. We have sustained some policy violations on use of force in the past.
So, assuming that most people would accept that explanation, even if we just look at the small group of people very close to any one of these incidents, and understand that they will always have some trouble accepting this because of their interpretation of the circumstances, would not an independent review where maybe appointed citizens or respected civic leaders would investigate and give their assessment, which we assume would be exonerating the officers in these, would that not be something valuable?
That would be valuable. It would be helpful. I think people would understand where the officers and policing is coming from even better. And I have publicly never opposed that. I have not opposed that.
Because there's a bill, right? And the legislature now is being considered.
And there's some work that needs to be done on the bill. There's some fine tuning that needs to take place. There is a fundamental fairness, though, with that. But before I get into that, I think we need to be clear if you are looking at someone investigating it or reviewing what has already been investigated. And I hear a number of people use both of those. If you're reviewing it, the reality is just about everything with our officer-involved shooting information investigation has been made public. And it has been very transparent, and people could see exactly what it is that was done. So in so many words, a review has been done. An investigation, that's something totally different. Now, for me, I don't have a problem with external review and external investigation. I have a problem with doing it where people don't know the rules of the game when they get involved in this. So this is high stakes for police officers. This is the probably, as I mentioned when I announced my retirement, this is a time where a moment of truth, where you are asking yourself and the department and the community, when I needed you most, where did you stand behind me? And this is very important for officers. The flip side of this is it is the most tragic thing that can happen to a community, to family members. There is really nothing good about this, and that's why across the United States and here, and rightfully so many people want to review and understand what took place at this tragedy.
Yep. We're going to talk a little bit more about the relationship between the Madison Police Department and the Madison community when we come back right after this.
It is time, because I don't think I could ever, with how much of my blood, sweat, and tears have gone into this department and this city, walking the streets, leading this organization, I don't think it would ever be an easy decision to do that.
Police Chief Noble Wray announcing his retirement, which becomes official this Thursday as he wraps up 30 years on the force and 10 years as chief. Noble, just with the context of what we were talking about in the first segment, are you comfortable with the relationship between the department and the community? Do you get a sense that, and not just you, but how the mayor handles it, how your top commanders handle it, how your community officers on the street, do you have a sense that there's a relationship there that is still solid?
There is no question in my mind. The department and the community have been so in lockstep, so engaged for so many years that the relationship is still very, very solid. Anytime you have a high-profile incident, you are going to challenge issues related to trust. I think the larger community is still lockstep. I think there are people with any kind of incident like this will never be able to reconcile why this happened. You've heard me talk over my tenure here, Neil, about trust and the importance and the value of it, but it is a journey. And in a moment's notice, that trust will be challenged. But if you approach the job, that is your job every day, when you go to work, every call, every incident, you're still working on continuing to build and engage and build the trust, both in the community and in the organization. It's really critical. I think the mayor has understood the totality of what was going on here. In terms of where the community was coming from, where the department is coming from, the most difficult thing for me has been to try to balance, where the community is coming from, what is needed by the officers, keep the officers in lockstep, because this has been, not only difficult for the community, and rightfully so, and the family, it's been very difficult for the officers. So I have personally felt at times right in the middle, trying to hold this thing together. But what has really helped is that this department enjoys tremendous support by this community.
I hope this isn't too obvious a question, Noble, but would it be safe to say that the department, most members of the department would prefer to have an internal candidate succeed you?
Yes.
Just as a measure
yes,
of how the department
yes,
functions.
Absolutely. For a number of reasons. One is they're a known commodity. They will have a sense of where this person is coming from once they would identify it. The other thing is that our principles, our core values are deeply ingrained within the department. And so the expectations are there. And organizations of this size, they want to know what is expected of them. And
almost, just as you think about who might be, likely candidates, the assumption would be that it would be a Cooper to Williams to Wray continuity of approach to policing.
Yeah, that's interesting. I remember the question that you asked me the first time we did For the Record when I became chief, and you asked the question, you said, is it going to be more like Cooper, or is it going to be more like Williams? And I said, it's going to be more like Wray. And I hope I've done that. I've had the opportunity to observe both chiefs and observe what they have done, had an opportunity to take the things that I thought worked, and leave the things that I didn't think was going to work, put that in the context of where we are in the history of the department and the city, and I think we've had probably the most productive 10 years in recent history in terms of those things that we have been able to accomplish. Yeah. I've been very fortunate to have people that I can look back on and see what they have done.
Well, but it is interesting to me because those some of those obvious elements of policing are really affect a lot of people, and you were very close to David. Richard he brought a slightly more formal and some would say military sort of approach to policing. When we see what's going on at the Capitol, the difference between Chief Tubbs's approach, it's a real dynamic conversation about what kind of public safety leadership do we want? What style of policing do we want? And I think that's a healthy conversation.
I think it's a healthy conversation, but I think what I've tried to do is to, as I said, balance the two. Let me give you an example, Neil. David Cooper talked a lot about decentralization, getting closer to the people that we serve. But we were unable to decentralize. We had an experimental police district, and that's all where we were going to go. Politically, people thought, and we told them, that decentralization would be less expensive. Turns out it was more expensive. It wasn't until Chief Williams got on board and took that more practical view that we were able to start working on getting outside of the city-county building. So, I think clearly, David's legacy is there, and I support his legacy and advocate for it. But I think history should be more kind to Chief Williams. He did do some things that were really, really important, and we would not have gotten out of that building if he did not allow for his command staff to work with the alders and the mayors and say, this is important to have these district stations in the community.
What do people need to know about our city from the perspective of law enforcement and the way it's changing and the way the neighborhoods are the dynamic of neighborhoods, the dynamic of State Street, the dynamic of the Philosopher's Corner, all that stuff, Noble. I mean, it all sort of, at one point during the day, interfaces with law enforcement.
What people need to know about this city, and I think people are really, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, is the backbone of the city, keeping the city intact and moving forward, is to ensure that our schools are safe. That is number one, because that's where we have the families and we have the kids and we have a hope for the future. So keeping the schools safe should be job one. After that, it goes to our neighborhoods. It really does. And making sure that not only do we have police in our neighborhoods, but we have police working in conjunction with residents. I have never, and I've said this before, I've never assigned a neighborhood officer to a neighborhood with an active neighborhood association. That's how important that community involvement is. It is so critical and vital to us keeping this community safe. Along with that, I think some of the standby issues we still have to address. We still need to address the level and use of alcohol in this community. The last 4 years, we've seen heroin on the rise, and it's having adverse impacts in different ways in terms of overdose, in terms of stealing and street robberies.
Sure.
And then we've got the whole, which you can do a whole show on, is how do we improve racial disparities in the criminal justice system? Because if you do, you will improve safety in Madison.
All right, I want to talk more about some of those issues, and we'll wrap up For the Record with Chief Noble Wray when we come back right after this.
The city has grown, it's become more urbanized. Those are the types of challenges that I think we really have to sit down and start to really pick apart and find out, what are the next challenges for the city of Madison? What are the next challenges for the Madison Police Department?
I think that we will be able to move forward. Having said that, his leadership, Chief Wray's leadership, and his inspiration on all of us will be missed.
Two of Chief Noble Wray's top managers in the department, Randy Gaber, who is the acting chief now until the Police and Fire Commission hires your successor, and I'm with Noble Wray, who retires this Thursday after 10 years as chief of the Madison Police Department. You mentioned the two priorities that this city should have, schools and neighborhoods. And just recently we had a fight after a football game. And then a couple of weeks before that, there was a pretty big disturbance in one of the neighborhoods on the southwest side. But what struck me, Noble, is that they were young people, sometimes very young people, and there were girls involved in it. And it just, it felt like we need to learn something from this.
Yeah, when people come to Madison, Madison has a good reputation at all levels. But when people come to Madison, and they come to Madison to partake in all what it has to offer, they really want to know if our most vulnerable population is safe. That's what people really want to know about a city. Is our most vulnerable, are we taking care of our most vulnerable population? And when you hear things of like what takes place at a school, a fight, a disturbance, or in the neighborhoods that is involving young people, that's why I say that is our priority. Some of these other things we're going to always systematically have to deal with. But if I'm a parent moving from somewhere else in Wisconsin, I say I want to relocate there. I want to start a family there. I want to engage in business and go to school there. Those are the things that they look for, and that's why I think that is so important.
You're right, racial disparities is a whole nother show, but it is on many levels an embarrassment. The way Wisconsin is viewed, the way, and I think what people don't understand is that Dane County and Madison is statistically, and I think viewed as a very disproportionately a difficult place for people of color to live. Where do we start to get on top of this problem?
Where do we start? Let me see if I can just quickly say where we have been. In 1993.
And we only have 2 minutes, so I'll warn you now.
Okay, 1993, we first publicly acknowledged that the disparities existed. Where we are now is I think we have a better understanding of the things that we can do. But what we're going to need to do is make some tough decisions in terms of really focusing on, and I think the priority is reentry. That is where we deal with repeat offenders, that we provide them with the necessary support and resources so that they don't reoffend.
Within the last year, someone, a prominent member of the Madison business community, said to me, if you can get Noble Wray to run for mayor, I'll sign up to be his campaign chief right now. What does retirement look like to you, Chief?
Retirement looks like doing some consulting work in the profession.
You're not going to run for mayor?
What I'm going to do is do what I'm planning on doing for like 6 months, and then ask myself, what are my future steps? Because when you're in the business for 30 years, in a business that is this demanding, I've never looked out ahead that far and thought of anything but this profession in policing.
Your public information officer and our old friend Joel Despain said you haven't had a vacation in a long, long time.
That's correct.
You're going to take a little?
Going to take a vacation.
Enjoy it.
Thank you very much.
You deserve it. Thanks, Noble.
Appreciate it.
We're going to come back and wrap up For the Record right after this. My thanks to Chief Noble Wray for being here this morning. We wish him well in his retirement. Next week, a talk with the director of the Wasteman Center. The Wasteman Center is celebrating its 40th anniversary in 2013, and we'll commemorate the anniversary with a look at some of the important work they do and also what they're doing to celebrate. That's next Sunday at 10. Thanks for watching. See you next week.